What's up, everyone? Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sawyer Brothers Show. Please be sure to follow and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and then follow our podcast accounts and SDI accounts on all socials. We post daily on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. If you enjoy the show, we'd really appreciate you leaving a review and sharing it with other potential listeners. Lastly, if you have a recommendation for topics or guests, feel free to reach out to us. We greatly appreciate your support. What's up, everyone? Episode 51 here today, the first episode of 2026. Somehow we're already into February. January flew by. It was a very busy month for me. It was a great month, but a very busy month. As I've said in the past, when I go through these busy times, the podcast gets pushed to the bottom of the list of my priorities. But I've got a whole list of ideas to work on throughout the year. I know in 2025, I got into a pretty good routine of posting somewhat regularly, and that's my goal and my plan again for 2026 as things come about. So on today's episode, I want to talk about Indiana football's national championship from last month. I don't claim to be a football analyst or a football enthusiast or guru or anything like that, but as a coach, I really enjoy studying other coaches and other leaders, whether they're related to hockey or other sports or business or really anything, and kind of study and learn about their stories and what they believe in and their strategies and their philosophies, and try to take what they've experienced and what they've accomplished and then apply it to my own life. So I've always had an interest in leadership, and then it's just grown and grown throughout my life. And this is not intended to be hardcore in the weeds in football or anything like that. I just wanted to talk about some things that I thought were interesting and worthwhile when it comes to trying to grow as a leader and grow as a coach. So Curt Cignetti is the head coach of Indiana's football program. He's the guy that basically drew me into this story and really attracted me to it. I'm sure even if you're not familiar with his name, you've seen his clips on social media over the last couple years. He's the guy in one of his early press conferences after getting the job. One of the reporters basically asked him, how is he going to build Indiana into a successful winning football program? And he responded by saying, "Google me, I win." So he had this confidence about him, and he had this swagger that not only did it attract people like me who were not affiliated with the program, but it obviously won over his players and his staff to, believe they can accomplish whatever they want and to ultimately accomplish the whole thing. They won a national championship, the pinnacle of college sports. So I've got a few different bullet points that I found interesting on their story, and, I'll touch on those. But just to give you a little background on the story, Curt Cignetti, he was hired in 2023. He previously was an assistant for Nick Saban at Alabama, had a ton of success there, and then he wanted to head coach. So he left his job there, basically a dream job working at Alabama, to go be a head coach at a lower school and kind of work his way back up. So he coached at a few different places, and ultimately he obviously ended up getting the job at Indiana, a Division I program, a Big Ten school, playing a very difficult schedule throughout the year and basically turned the entire program around. So the thing that you'll find most remarkable about this story is that not only did they win the whole championship, but they did it in a fashion that was unlike any other previous champion. So they did it quicker. He turned the program around from basically being a failure of a program. A lot of people viewed Indiana as a basketball school because of the success they had in basketball historically. They were not known as a football school. And there's all these different pictures that show, like, when Cignetti took over, the crowd was nowhere even near being full, almost empty on certain days. And by the end of it, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. But ultimately, as they continued to succeed, like, more and more people began to believe, and that included his team as well. I read an article that said, on paper, they are the least talented football team to win a national championship ever. When it comes to recruiting college football and in other sports, there's the highly touted prospects from high school that have like the star rating. So a 5-star recruit is the highest. They're the best. The 4 stars are a little weaker, and then 3 stars and two stars and so on. And there's even some players that are just not rated. Indiana had 0 5 stars. They had 7 4 stars, 55 3 stars, and some even 2 stars and less on their roster. Now, they did have guys that transferred into their program when Cignetti took over the team, but even those guys were not highly touted recruits or star players or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of data that shows their rosters were so weak. Like, according to this other article, they had the 72nd most talented roster in college football last year. Just to give you a comparison for previous years, Ohio State in 2024 had the 3rd best. Michigan had the 14th best in 2023. And then if I just rifle off some of the others before, Georgia had the 2nd best. Alabama had the 2nd best. LSU had the 5th best. And then before that, it's like Clemson, Alabama, they're the 6th best, the 1st best, the 9th best, the 1st best. Like, we're talking about teams that normally won because, yeah, they had great coaching and a great culture and all those things. But along with it, they had the best players. They had the best talent. They had the most talented roster to go along with it. And Indiana did not. They had the 72nd best roster according to these different talent metrics. And how do you measure talent? I mean, it's a whole different way to evaluate, and it's different for everybody. But regardless, it's an extreme difference when it comes to those numbers. They went 16-0. They won the Big Ten championship, and then they finished it off by winning the national championship, obviously. So 3 bullet points that I found interesting about their story. Number 1, they recruit the person over the player. So what I mean by that is, to go along with the lack of quote unquote talent, they were focused on certain traits in their players as people more than just the talent that they were as a football player. And I think that's something that is so important as a coach, because like, if I reflect on my coaching career, every year we would have tryouts and there'd be a ton of different guys out there. And of course, the flashy guy is the guy who gets your attention first, the most skilled player, the talented player who maybe he scored a nice goal or he's carrying the puck up and down the ice and that type of thing. And those guys get your attention right away. But the guys that are sometimes undercover players, maybe they're not the most talented, but they're the best teammates. They're the hardest workers. They're the most coachable players. Those are the guys that you win with. And you need the talent as well, obviously. I guess maybe in this case, they proved you don't need as much of it as we previously thought. But you need those other traits to succeed in your sport and in life. And I think that's something that differentiated this championship from some of those other schools, because, of course, every coach, every scout, every recruiter is going to look at talent, and they're going to look at statistics, and they're going to look at all those different things. But at the end of the day, the difference maker is those intangibles. It's those different qualities that are going to motivate someone to work harder, that will, outwork the talent of the other player. They're going to be more focused. They're going to be team first guys instead of selfish individuals. So I thought that was clearly a theme that was reoccurring in every interview that I listened to, whether it was Coach Cignetti or his players or his staff or fans or whoever. And I mean, it's right there. Like, the data shows it. They weren't the most talented team. So they had to have these guys that came out and they brought other skills to the table other than just being the fastest player, the best runner, the best thrower, best linesman, whatever. They had to have other intangibles. So focusing on the person over the player, I think that is a huge thing. And again, that's something that everyone in a leadership role, maybe you're a manager, you're a boss, and you're trying to find the next candidate for a job opening. The person who has the flashiest resume is not always the best one for the job. And that's just is proven time and time again. So I thought that was a very important bullet point for this story. Second, I have leadership from the top. What I mean by that is Curt Cignetti was able to lead this whole program, the whole list of all the different coaches, the support staff, down to the players, down to the student assistants, down to everybody. That comes from that initial person at the top. If that person can't have the vision and then he can't communicate that vision to the next layer below, then the next layer below that can't continue that same vision down all the way to the bottom, to the backups, to the third string, to the fourth string, to the scratches, to whoever else. And he spoke about that a lot in his press conferences leading up to the national championship and after. He credited his leadership, the captains of the team, the leaders of the team, a ton with that, because so many of the players that he had in Indiana were previously his players at the other jobs that he had, the previous schools. When he took the job, he said he didn't expect so many players to come with, but so many of his previous players at those lower schools, they transferred to Indiana as well. And it was a major step up for him as a coach going to that next level, but it was a major step up for those players as well. And they basically knew his messaging. They knew his communication style. They knew what he expected of his team. And those players were able to come in and immediately take what they knew and apply that and teach those other guys, those other teammates, and those other people in the program what to expect and how they have to work. And they set the standard and they set the tone. And that's what I mean. It comes from the top. It comes from your coach to create it. And then it comes from the next layer of leaders, the other coaches, and then most importantly, those player leaders to take it to the next level. And again, he spoke about that deeply. Like the press conference after, he's got all the different players up there, their quarterback, Mendoza, who won the Heisman Trophy. Again, he was not someone who was a highly touted recruit or anything like that. He had a couple other like linemen and defensive guys up there. And some of those guys had been with him for years. And they knew the messaging, they knew what the vision was, and they took that and they applied it to the new program at Indiana, and all those younger guys followed along. That is so big. Again, it can't just come from one guy. The first guy at the top has to set the tone and set the standard and express the vision, and everybody else has to next layer down, follow that same thing. So I thought that was a really important part of their story. Lastly, one of the biggest things in all of life for me, it is having the belief and the mentality that you are going to succeed. This is something that will separate good from great, bad from good, everything. Because if you can believe it and you can hold yourself to that standard of what you want to accomplish, you can accomplish anything. If you say at the beginning of the season, you're going to win a national championship, you don't automatically win a national championship just for saying it or just for believing it. But if you have that mentality and you have that belief and you take that confidence and you look at the big picture every day, and then you fail and you lose a game or something individually, like you get cut from a team, or you're a first line player or a starter and then you get demoted to the second line. If you have that belief, you will get back to where you want to be. You take every loss as a lesson and you grow from it out all the time. So often teams will set a goal to just get to a certain round of the playoffs. So for example, if you're looking at the season, and I'll use high school hockey as an example because that's what I'm most invested in every day, obviously. The teams that wake up in October or in November when the season starts and they say, we want a regional championship. Our goal is a regional championship. That's great. For some seasons, for some teams, that is the pinnacle. That is the peak of their accomplishments. And that's fantastic. But if you set your standards on winning the state championship, which is obviously past a regional championship, you will likely accomplish the regional championship and more. You might even do the whole thing and win the whole state championship, but it's the mentality and the belief behind it at the core that separate you from just kind of getting there. It's like the old saying of, you shoot for the moon, you land on the stars. And that is a major belief and mentality that I have in life. Like I don't understand not trying to do something to be the best. Like I don't understand not trying to win the whole thing. If you don't win the whole thing and if you aren't the best, that's going to happen more than you do when you are the best. Of course, I have been in tons of tournaments and championships throughout my life, and I have lost way more than I have ever won them. But it's the mentality and the belief that keeps me going, and it keeps my teams going. It keeps all of it motivated, and it allows me to continue getting better throughout my life and everything. If you just want to wake up and just kind of half-ass it, you can, of course. It's up to you. I don't understand it. Like I can't do that. I have a very difficult time with accepting that. And I have a very difficult time with accepting that of people around me as well, which is why throughout my life, whether they were my teammates, whatever the role was or the relationship was, if I didn't think someone was giving it their all and I didn't think that they wanted to accomplish the whole thing, unfortunately we butted heads. And that's just how it is. Like people know that's how I am, and that's how I've always been, and that's probably how I always will be. With saying all that, there's more to life than winning, and I have that in check as well. I know how to like zoom out and look at the big picture on things. But regardless, I'm always going to try to win. I'm always going to try to be better. I'm always going to try to be the best that I possibly can. And I think that's one of the things I owe to myself in life, and it's also one of the things that if you're on a team, you owe it to your team as well. One of the metaphors that I have for, the belief and the mentality and like shooting to be the best is the dumbbell rack theory is what I've called it in the past. This is nothing like super complex, but it was something that like when it clicked in my mind years ago, it was probably like a decade ago when I first thought about it. It's kind of stuck with me since. So at the gym that I used to go to in high school, there was 2 dumbbell racks. On one rack, there was 5s to 50s. So 5, 10, 15, all the way to 50 on one side of the room. And on the other side of the room, it was the 55s to 100s. So 55, 60, 65, all the way to 100. And so for the longest time while I was in high school, when I was first working out, I thought the heaviest dumbbells in the world were the 100s. Like I could not wrap my head around fully even getting above 100. I would do my lifts, I'd do chest press or whatever, and I'd be like, all right, I'm going to get 70 today or 80 today. And then finally near the end of my time going to Trent Athletic Club, like I got close to doing the 100s, but I didn't know that there was anything beyond that. And so my belief and my mentality was, I can't wait to do the 100s. I'm just building to get to the 100s. Fast forward a couple years after that, Griff and I started going to a new gym, Raise the Bar in Lincoln Park. And it was more of a bodybuilder style gym. And their dumbbells went up to like, I don't know, like close to 200, maybe even over 200. And immediately when I walked in, my whole perspective shifted. I went from thinking the 100s were the highest, that was the best, to now seeing like, okay, wait, no, there's 110s, there's 120s, there's 180s. And so immediately, well, we can get past the 100s. Now we got to go up to the next thing. And so I think that's such an important thing in life to, if you can believe there's more and you can see more of it, you can allow your mentality to shift, and then you can work even harder to get there because you know it's possible, you know it's attainable. Another example of that, very simply, is every year, if you look at records being set in any sport, if you look at track records, at one time, the first person that completed a mile was the fastest. Like it could have been an hour and they had the record. And then the next time someone's like, I'm going to do 59:30. And they did 59:30 and they beat it. And then that next person went, I'm going to do 59. And so on and so on and so on. And that record just kept getting beat and beat and beat because people just kept seeing that and they believed in themselves and they pushed themselves to beat that. So the whole point is if you have the belief and the mentality to accomplish it all, you might not accomplish it, but you'll probably get pretty close. And because of that, you'll have accomplished more than you ever even would have thought previously, and you'll have more to be proud of. Because at the end of the day, when your sport is done and whatever else in life is done, if you can sit there and know that you did what you could and you believed it and you worked your hardest, that's a very, very important part of life, to have that satisfaction. And it feels so much better if you know you went after the big thing than just going after the little thing. You got to go after the big thing, in my opinion. So like I said, you could go on bullet point after bullet point of different things for why Indiana won. But again, these are just 3 things that I found basically as a theme in every article I read, every interview I watched, whether it was Coach Cignetti or one of his players. Their goal was to win a national championship. He came in and said they were going to win. He knew they were going to win a national championship the whole time. And because he knew that, their standard was the best. They did whatever they could to be the best and to win, and they succeeded because of that. It comes down to their belief and their mentality. I would almost guarantee that if their goal was to just win games and win a bowl game, they probably aren't winning the national championship. Because they had the goal for the whole entire thing, that's what carried them through all those moments and got them to the full thing. Again, there's so much more to it, but I thought these were 3 bullet points that I could relate to my life, and I'm sure others can relate to theirs as well. So lastly here, one thing I want to do moving forward is I want to close episodes with saying something that I'm looking forward to. And then whenever I have a guest on, I'll ask him or her something that they're looking forward to as well. So my answer for this episode is I'm looking forward to the men's hockey division at the Winter Olympics. They start later this week, and the U.S. is obviously one of the favorites to win. With the NHL players not playing since 2018, there's a lot of anticipation for this tournament and seeing these guys play and put on their respective uniforms for their country. So I'm really looking forward to watching that and experiencing that. I'm really looking forward to see this next generation of players, guys that are my age and younger that never have played in the Olympics, finally get that opportunity. So I anticipate those games being a lot of fun to watch for the U.S. and for the other countries. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you all for listening again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.